Hello, K-Man here, and my big Mac, which I got for a pricely sum of $15, admittedly quite a while ago before they reached the prices that they are nowadays, though we did get pretty excited when we found out on everymac.com that you could get them originally for around about $9,000, which works out to be about twice that amount nowadays in US dollars. Kind of blows your mind about how expensive those would have been back in those days. Kind of like a Mac Pro, except even more expensive. Let's go and have a look inside of it and load up some games onto the SCSI2SD. I've also got a BlueSCSI with me as well, and check out what this Macintosh Quadra 950 can do. The Quadra 950 was the successor to the Quadra 900, and they were the first full tower cases that Macintoshes came in. And it has a whole bunch of connectivity on the back, monitors and SCSI, some printer and modem, got the keyboard ports and the sound inputs and outputs, but the coolest bit is all the expansion, with the ability to put in 5 expansion cards, and we do have a network card installed on this one. I do have a bit of a struggle when I'm trying to get into it though, because it seems to snap in quite firm and hard, even if you do have, like most of these, a few broken hinges or clips. You start by pushing in the 2 clips in the back, and there might be a screw in the middle of those 2 clips as well, and then it should hinge out. Then with a bit of patience and being a bit careful with the old plastics, which can be a bit brittle on these Macs, you finally get that side panel off. Let's have a quick look inside, and I'm not really expecting anything bad, as these models are pretty good as far as capacitors are concerned. There's the network card and SCSI cable. We've got the CPU underneath that heatsink, a 68040, and there's a floppy drive cable that ain't plugged in. There's plenty of slots to expand your RAM, and this one has 16 megs in it. I've already removed the battery to avoid any battery leaking disasters. Underneath the massive power supply is the video RAM and a whole bunch of other stuff, and on top of it is where you would put your CD drive and your floppy drive, and I've also got my SCSI2SD sitting up on there. You load up disk images onto the SCSI2SD, and I feel like the most easiest way to get one started is using an emulator. So I've got this one here, which I've all set up using instructions on a blog, which I'll link to in the description. The emulator gives you an easy way to install the operating system and software, and even copy across files from your real computer onto the emulator just using this drive called Unix, which links to a folder anywhere on your computer. Getting your emulator disk image onto your BlueSCSI is pretty simple. You just copy it across onto an SD card and rename the file name so the beginning of it says HD1. Add any other images you want, stick it back into the BlueSCSI, and you're good to go. The SCSI2SD requires a few extra steps. You want to stick your SD card into it and then plug the SCSI2SD into the computer, ignore that message, and then use either DD or a GUI disk imaging program to image that file onto the SD card, and then it will take its time. And once it's finished imaging, you want to go into the SCSI2SD utility and make sure all the settings are correct. Then with everything plugged back in, it's time to start it up using a key. Yes, you can do it the usual way by pressing the key on the keyboard, but I do like this. It sort of feels like starting your car, or, like a missile launch key. It does take a while for the Mac to load, and I've sort of cut ahead a fair bit so that, you don't have to sit through the whole loading sequence. It's not too bad. Once it's loaded, you can see everything on your emulator image, but to use the Macintosh, you do have to make sure you flick that key back out of lock mode. I've installed the network drivers for that network card, so let's go and see how well the Quadra goes on the internet. Google does sort of work. It doesn't look pretty though, but you can go and type in your search and get a whole pile of results. Unfortunately, for some odd reason, you can't actually click on the results. It kind of does nothing. There is an option of Frog Find, which is a search engine based on DuckDuckGo that's designed for older browsers and computers, and it will even convert it into something a bit more friendly for the older machines, which kinda isn't completely useful for us. So we'll just go straight to the actual page, and hey, guess what? It's Macintosh. So be sure to check out all the other Macintosh content around Macintosh computers this month, and yeah, any time of the year. We're probably not going to be watching too much of that video content on our old 68K Macs, but just for fun, let's see how Twitch goes. And not too surprisingly, Twitch, no matter what I tried, goes nowhere. But I do know that you can use IRC to go and tap into the Twitch chat. So just type in join Jate live and go check out what's happening on his channel. And that chat's kind of making me wonder what is actually going on. So yeah, I'll just go grab this convenient screen that I need to place somewhere. You're not limited to receiving messages, you can send them as well. Although I do find that it can be a little bit slow in receiving the messages. They do instantly appear on Twitch though. And if you want to, you can even type in an emoji and it will appear as the emoji on Twitch. Actually, what would be pretty cool is if the emojis appeared on the Mac, so maybe someone wants to make an app. As an aside, for anyone wondering why I didn't go full 90s nostalgia and use the CRT, yeah, as you can see, I couldn't get it looking exactly right, even though it looks so sweet in person and much nicer than the LCD, which is still pretty adequate. And let's go and try out some games now and see how well the Macintosh performs. Does it play Doom? Well, yeah, it does. And it's not looking the best as far as frames are concerned, which I eventually worked out the problem was I was using virtual memory, which slows down the computer. And yeah, it's still maybe not as smooth as running it on like a Pentium, but it's pretty playable as it is there, and considering the computer came out before Doom, I'm pretty satisfied with how it's performing. Another game which requires a 68040 CPU but should be a bit more easier on the frames is Flashback, often confused as a sequel to Another World. It's a rather intriguing, pretty nice looking game made by a French developer, and was also a bestseller of its time. Looked pretty good, and I just need to work out how to proceed after watching the Holocube. Another platformer, this one a more action-packed one made by Halo and Destiny developer Bungie, is Abuse, where you are just dealing with a whole bunch of genetic mutants and somehow you're immune to all the strife that's going on, but it means you must, well, change the settings so that you actually get a few good frames. I found double pixel mode works a whole lot better.
Select ammo to increase firing speed. Aim gun with mouse. Fire with mouse button.
Yeah, this game's a whole bunch of fun. I do like the soft tutorial that it has with all of the instructions that are verbally given to you, and some of the sort of lighter scenarios which I imagine will be much more intense as you get on with the game. I don't know what it is, there's just something so satisfying about this game. On to another Bungie title, a bit more of a well-known one, Marathon, which they were thinking of rebooting. Maybe they still are, who knows. And also, who knows how to control it. That's one thing I've found with these old games. All your standard WASD is not what you have, and in fact, just because they do seem to have extra controls on that end of the keyboard, I went for the Doom controls, and yeah, it's much more easier to use. I was actually surprised to find out that this is actually on high resolution graphics. So yeah, I went and tried out the lower resolution graphics to see how that goes. and it was almost a little bit too responsive. I was sort of finding myself half the time turning into shooting the walls and yeah, just walking around kind of like I had absolutely no sense of direction. So yeah, I don't know, not too bad. I guess I'll get used to it after a while and once I've worked out the exact key combinations. Time to go back to a game that I'm much more familiar with, Star Wars Dark Forces, the very first one. Yeah, the controls were all 90s-ish, but I'm getting used to using the keypad, so yeah, minus the bit that my 2 key doesn't work, so I can't walk back. I've got to use the mouse to walk back. But yeah, good fun going around, blasting those Imperials, the very pixelated looking stormtroopers, and yeah, it runs okay. In fact, I've heard that some people say that the Mac version is a bit more higher quality than the DOS version. For those wanting some more solid numbers behind the performance of this Macintosh Quadra 950, here's how it compares to a Quadra 840 AV. Not as good. Much better than a Mac LC3, which is another computer I own. A Quadra 650, yes, slightly better. And just for fun, looking at a Macintosh SC, which gets absolutely whooped by the 950, and not as much as the Mac Classic does. And just for fun as well, let's go look at the Mac Color Classic, slightly less of a whoop in there. Maybe not the most fastest 68K Mac, but it's still up there. I absolutely enjoyed giving it a bit of a spin. Haven't played with it for quite a while now, and I even found a new game for me to play. So I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and do check out the other Macintosh videos. I have links in the description, all that like and subscribe stuff, and most of all, thanks for watching.